The night I opened that hotel door, I realized some ghosts don't stay buried. They wait for room service. It was 2:13 a.m. in the presidential suite, 70 floors above Manhattan, the city glowing beneath me like a circuit board of secrets. I had just finished a call that would shift millions of dollars before sunrise, my tie loosened, whiskey untouched on the glass table. Power is loud in boardrooms, but in private it's quiet. Heavy. Lonely. When the knock came, soft but certain, I almost ignored it. I hadn't ordered anything. Room service. A woman's voice said through the door, steady but low. Something about it made my chest tighten. I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself I didn't care. I opened the door anyway. Olivia stood there in a black Maid uniform that hung a little too loose on her frame, her blonde hair twisted into a simple bun, a name tag that read Claire pinned above her heart. For 3 seconds, neither of us breathed. 3 years ago, I signed divorce papers to set her free. I told her I didn't love her anymore. I told her she was holding me back. Every word was a lie built to protect her from a world that keeps score in blood and loyalty. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were the same, blue, sharp, unafraid of me. "Excuse me, sir," she said, professional, distant, like we were strangers. "Sir." The word hit harder than anything else could have. I stepped aside without thinking. She walked in, pushing the cart over the thick carpet, the scent of hotel soap and clean linen following her. My suite suddenly felt too small for both of us. "You shouldn't be here," I said, closing the door quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I never have to. She didn't turn around. "I work here," she replied, placing silver covers on the dining table with careful precision. "People need jobs, Alexander." Hearing my name on her lips again felt like stepping back into a life I'd locked away. I moved closer, just enough to see her hands. No ring. Of course there wasn't. I made sure of that. "Out of every hotel in this city," I said, "you chose this one." She finally faced me, and there was something in her expression I didn't recognize. Not hurt. Not love. Determination. "I didn't choose it," she said softly. "I needed access." Access. The word echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Olivia never did anything without reason. If she was here, it wasn't coincidence. And the worst part? I had known for 2 weeks she'd been hired under a false name. I could have stopped it. I didn't. Because part of me wanted to see if she would come back on her own. She thinks she's here to uncover the truth about who I've become. What she doesn't know is I became this to keep her alive. And now that she's standing in my suite again, I'm not sure I can let her walk away a second time. She said she needed access, and I felt the floor shift beneath the polished calm I had built over the past 3 years. Olivia had never cared about money, never cared about power, so if she was standing in my suite at 2 in the morning under a fake name, it meant she was chasing something dangerous. I watched her move around the table, lifting silver lids, adjusting plates that neither of us intended to touch. Her hands were steady, but I knew the rhythm of her breathing. It was faster than normal. She was nervous, and Olivia never got nervous unless the stakes were high. "Access to what?" I asked quietly. I did not step closer this time. Distance felt safer. For both of us. She glanced toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretching 12 miles in every direction, lights blinking red and white against the dark. "To you," she said. No accusation. No softness. Just truth. I let out a slow breath. 3 years ago, in a courthouse that smelled like old paper and bad coffee, she looked at me like I was a stranger. I told her I was choosing ambition over marriage. I told her love was a distraction. The judge signed the decree at 10:42 in the morning. By noon, she was no longer legally mine. What she never knew was that 24 hours before that hearing, I had been handed a photograph of her walking out of a grocery store, a red circle drawn around her head. A warning. Marrying me had made her visible. Divorcing me made her invisible again. That was the plan. It worked. Until now. "You could have called," I said. "You did not need to pretend." She gave a soft laugh that did not reach her eyes. "Called you? The man who erased me like I was a mistake." The words landed heavier than any threat ever could. I deserved that. I deserved worse. I stepped toward the bar and poured water instead of whiskey. My hands did not shake. They never do. "If you are here to expose me," I said carefully, "you will not like what that costs." She turned fully then, crossing her arms over the plain black fabric of her uniform. "I am not here to destroy you, Alexander. I am here because someone approached me 6 weeks ago. My chest tightened. Who? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Someone had found her. Someone who should not have known her name. They said you were building something bigger, she continued. Something that would change the balance in this city. And that people would get hurt. I felt the old instinct rise, the one that calculates risk in seconds. If she had been contacted, the firewall I built around her life had cracked. So you decided to play housekeeper in my hotel? I asked. I decided to see if the man I married still exists, she replied softly. The air between us shifted then. Not anger. Not fear. Something more fragile. She thinks she came here to uncover the truth about my empire. What she does not realize is that the moment she stepped back into my world, every threat that once circled me will notice her again. And this time, I am not sure divorce papers will be enough to keep her safe. Her last words lingered between us like smoke that refused to clear. Divorce papers will not be enough. She was right, even if she did not understand why. I moved toward the windows, looking down at the river cutting through the city like a vein of silver under the moonlight. 70 floors up, everything looks peaceful, quiet, controlled. That illusion costs more than most people make in a lifetime. Who approached you? I asked again, softer this time. Olivia hesitated, and that pause confirmed my worst fear. Whoever reached her had done it carefully. Not loud. Not reckless. Strategic. A woman, she said finally. Late 30s. Gray coat. She knew where I work. She knew about the divorce. She said you were about to expand into something federal. My jaw tightened. Federal meant attention. Attention meant exposure. Exposure meant weakness. And Olivia had always been my only real weakness. I turned to face her fully. The suite felt smaller now, the air thinner. Did you give her anything? I asked. She lifted her chin, the same stubborn tilt she used to have when we argued about paint colors or where to spend Christmas. No. I told her I did not know anything. But she said if I cared about innocent people, I would find out. Innocent people. The phrase sounded almost ironic coming from someone who once watched me build an empire from nothing. She believed I had changed. Maybe I had. Or maybe I had simply become more honest about who I needed to be to survive. So you applied for a job at my hotel? I said. You forged identification. She did not deny it. You always told me this place was untouchable, she replied. I wanted to see if that was true. A slow breath left my lungs. Untouchable was a myth. Everything can be touched. Everything can be reached. It just depends on how much someone is willing to risk. I walked toward her until there were barely 2 feet between us. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. 3 years ago, she used to stand this close while tying my tie before charity dinners. Her fingers would brush my collar, her perfume faint and familiar. Now there was only hotel soap and distance. Olivia, I said quietly, if someone is using you to get to me, they are not doing it for justice. They are doing it for leverage. Her eyes flickered. She understood that word. Leverage means pressure. Pressure means consequences. Are you saying I am in danger? She asked. The question was calm, but I heard the tremor underneath. I did not answer immediately. Silence is sometimes the only honest response. Because the truth was simple. The moment she stepped back into my orbit, she became visible again. And visibility in my world is never harmless. A soft chime echoed from the hallway outside, followed by the faint murmur of voices. My security detail checking in. Routine. Predictable. Except nothing about tonight was predictable. Olivia glanced toward the door. Do they know who I am? She asked. I held her gaze. Not yet, I said. And I realized something as the words left my mouth. I had kept her secret. I had known she was here for 2 weeks, watching through quiet reports and camera footage, and I had said nothing. Because part of me needed to see if she would choose me again, even if she claimed she was here for the truth. Now the line between protection and possession felt dangerously thin, and I was not sure which side I was standing on anymore. The hallway voices faded after a few seconds, but the echo stayed in my chest. Olivia stood there, waiting for an answer I was not ready to give. Not yet is a fragile promise. It buys time. It does not buy safety. She smoothed her hands over the edge of the service cart, a small nervous habit she probably did not realize she still had. 3 years ago, she used to do that before asking me difficult questions. About late nights. About guarded phone calls. About the way my world seemed to expand while hers kept shrinking. You knew I was here, she said quietly, reading my silence. It was not a question. I nodded once. There was no point pretending. For how long? 2 weeks. The number landed between us like a confession. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in something closer to betrayal. You watched me, she whispered. I did not deny that either. I made sure you were safe, I corrected. Her jaw tightened. That is not the same thing. She was right. Watching is control. Protecting is love. The line between them is thinner than most people understand. I stepped back, giving her space because for once I needed to prove I could. If someone contacted you, I said carefully, then they believe you still matter to me. The truth in that sentence was sharper than anything else I had said tonight. She exhaled slowly, and I saw it then. Not anger, not accusation, fear, not for herself, for me. Do you care? She asked. If I matter to you? I held her gaze. I never stopped. The words were simple, honest, heavy. Her eyes flickered, and for a second I saw the woman who once stood barefoot in our kitchen at 6 a.m, sunlight catching in her hair while she made coffee in an apartment that barely fit a couch and a dream. Before the suits, before the guards, before 70 floors of distance. Then why did you let me believe you chose power over me? She asked. Because choosing you would have painted a target over your heart, I wanted to say. Because loving me publicly would have made you leverage. Because in my world, attachment is currency. Instead, I walked to the desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a thin manila folder. I had carried it with me for 3 years. Proof of the threat. Photographs. Notes. A timeline of decisions that ended our marriage to keep her breathing. I placed it on the table, but did not open it. The day before the hearing, I said quietly, someone sent me a message. It was clear. If you stayed my wife, you would be used against me. She stared at the folder like it might explode. So you humiliated me in court, she said, voice tight. You destroyed us. I protected you, I replied. The words sounded hollow even to me. Protection without explanation feels like betrayal. I understood that now. Outside the suite, the elevator chimed again. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A coded notification from security. Movement on the floor. Unscheduled. My pulse did not spike, but my focus sharpened. Someone was watching. Maybe not the hotel. Maybe not the suite. But something about tonight was no longer contained. Olivia saw the shift in my posture. What is it? She asked. I looked at her, at the woman I divorced to save, now standing in my world again under a false name. It means, I said quietly, that you should not have come back. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I was not afraid of the people outside that door. I was afraid of what would happen if I had to let her walk away again. My phone vibrated again, longer this time, a silent pulse against my palm that meant the situation outside was no longer routine. Olivia watched me, her eyes moving from my face to the folder on the table and back again. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a summer storm breaks over the Hudson. You said someone sent you a message, she whispered. Why did you never tell me? Because telling you would have pulled you deeper in. Because loving me openly would have made you visible to people who trade in leverage. I picked up the folder and slid it toward her. Open it, I said quietly. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she lifted the flap. Inside were copies of photographs taken from across the street from our old apartment. Her leaving the bookstore. Her stepping into a taxi. Dates. Times. Notes in handwriting that was not mine. She went still. They were watching me, she breathed. Because of you. I nodded once. There was no defense that would not sound like an excuse. The message was simple. I continued. If you remain my wife, you would become a point of negotiation. She closed the folder slowly, pressing it flat against the table as if she could smooth away the past. So you decided for me, she said. You decided I could not handle the truth. Her voice did not rise, but it cut deeper than anger would have. I stepped closer, stopping an arm's length away. I decided I would rather have you hate me than see you used, I answered. The words hung there, heavy and imperfect. Outside the door, footsteps paused. A murmur. Then silence. My security team was alert. Someone had asked about the suite. Unscheduled interest. My world was shifting again, and she was standing in the center of it. The woman who approached me. Olivia said suddenly, as if a memory had snapped into place. She mentioned tonight. My chest tightened. What about tonight? She said something important would move through this building before sunrise. She said if I wanted to understand what you have become, I should watch carefully. I felt the calculation settle over me like a coat. Tonight had been chosen carefully. Meetings staggered. Transfers disguised. Everything clean. But if someone had tipped her off, then someone inside my circle had spoken. That meant the threat was closer than I thought. I moved to the desk and checked the encrypted screen built into the surface. All green indicators. No alarms. But green can lie. Olivia, I said, turning back to her. Did you tell anyone you were coming to this floor? She shook her head immediately. No. I switched shifts. I used a different keycard. Smart. Careful. Still not enough. A soft knock echoed against the door. Not aggressive. Not loud. Controlled. My pulse did not race, but my focus sharpened to a point. Sir, one of my men said through the door. There is a guest requesting access to this level. Says she is meeting someone in your suite. Olivia's eyes widened. I did not tell anyone, she whispered. I believed her, which meant the woman in the gray coat had not come alone. I walked toward the door slowly, each step deliberate. Stay behind me, I said quietly. Not as a command. As a reflex. Because no matter what truth she came here to uncover, one fact remained constant. She might have divorced me on paper, but in every way that mattered, she was still the one thing I would not allow this world to take from me. The knock came again, softer this time, patient, like whoever stood outside knew they would be let in eventually. I did not rush. Rushing shows nerves. Nerves invite questions. I glanced back at Olivia. She stood near the wall, not hiding, just steadying herself, her hands clasped loosely in front of her black uniform. 3 years ago she used to stand beside me at events, smiling through rooms filled with men who underestimated her. Tonight she looked the same. Calm. Composed. Stronger than she realized. Do not speak unless I ask you to, I said quietly. It was not about control. It was about containment. I opened the door halfway. Marcus, my head of security, stood there in a dark suit that blended into the hallway shadows. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. She says her name is Evelyn Harper, he said evenly. Claims she has business with you regarding a compliance review. Compliance. That was the word people used when they wanted to sound official without revealing their true authority. Is she alone? I asked. As far as we can see. As far as we can see meant there were cameras watching every angle within a quarter mile. It also meant whoever she was, she understood presentation. I stepped back. Bring her. Marcus nodded once and turned away. I closed the door gently and looked at Olivia. Gray coat? I asked. She swallowed. Yes. I exhaled slowly. So the woman had followed through. Bold. Confident. That meant she believed she had leverage. Olivia moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. If she is law enforcement, you need to. Let me handle this. I almost smiled. She still thought she could shield me. If she is law enforcement, I replied softly. She would not come at 2 in the morning without paperwork. A soft chime echoed as the elevator doors opened down the hall. Footsteps approached. Measured. Unhurried. I felt the familiar stillness settle into my bones, the one that comes before negotiation. Not fear. Focus. The door opened again, and Marcus stepped aside. A woman in her late 30s entered the suite wearing a tailored gray coat over a navy dress. Her posture was perfect. Her gaze calculated. She did not look at me first. She looked at Olivia. That told me everything. Mrs. Reed, she said calmly. Olivia stiffened. The name had not been spoken in this room until now. I kept my expression neutral. You are mistaken, I said smoothly. That is a member of the hotel staff. Evelyn Harper gave a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. Of course, she replied. And I am simply here for a conversation. She stepped farther into the suite without waiting for permission, her heels quiet against the carpet. You have built something impressive here, Mr. Reed, she continued. But expansion attracts attention. There it was. Not an accusation. A warning. Olivia's presence in this room was no longer coincidence. It was strategy. I met Evelyn's gaze steadily. Attention is not always unwelcome, I said. It depends on the terms. She studied me for a long second, then glanced back at Olivia again. The terms, she said softly, depend on what you are willing to lose. The room fell silent. The city lights flickered beyond the glass. And for the first time tonight, I realized this was never about exposure or investigation. It was about leverage, and they had already chosen their pressure point. The words lingered in the air long after Evelyn stopped speaking. What you are willing to lose. She did not have to look at Olivia again. We all understood the implication. I kept my posture relaxed, my voice level. You came here without a warrant, I said calmly. That suggests this is not an official visit. Evelyn removed her gloves slowly, placing them on the glass table as if she had all the time in the world. Official visits create headlines, she replied. I prefer conversations. Olivia stood perfectly still near the wall, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. She was not afraid for herself. She was calculating, trying to understand which side she had walked into. You approached my former wife? I said evenly. Under false pretenses. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Former? She repeated, almost amused. Interesting choice of emphasis. I did not react. Reacting gives power away. You told her something important would move through this building tonight, Olivia said suddenly, her voice steady despite everything. I glanced at her briefly. She had stepped forward on her own. Bold. Always bold. Evelyn's eyes flickered with approval. Yes, she said softly. And I was correct. Silence pressed in. The city outside glittered like nothing was happening 70 floors above it. You believe Mr. Reed is expanding into territory that invites federal scrutiny, Evelyn continued. We believe you are uniquely positioned to confirm or deny that. There it was. Recruitment disguised as concern. Olivia's chin lifted. You want me to spy, she said plainly. Evelyn smiled faintly. I want you to ensure that no innocent people are harmed by unchecked ambition. I almost laughed, but I did not. They always dress leverage in moral language. It sounds cleaner that way. You miscalculated, I said quietly. She does not belong to my operations. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. Everyone belongs to something, Mr. Reed. Her words were deliberate. Olivia inhaled slowly, then looked at me. Not at Evelyn. At me. Is it true? She asked. The question was simple, but it carried 3 years of distance. 3 years of silence. 3 years of wondering who I had become after I walked out of that courtroom. I held her gaze. I do not build chaos, I said carefully. I build control. It was the closest I could come to the truth without exposing the structure beneath it. Evelyn observed us both like a chess player watching pieces move exactly where she expected. Control, she repeated softly. Until it slips. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. A coded alert. Level 3 protocol. Someone had accessed a restricted elevator bank downstairs. Not an accident. Coordinated. Evelyn saw the slight shift in my shoulders. You see, she said quietly. Expansion attracts instability. Olivia's eyes moved between us, the realization settling in. This was not just about leverage anymore. Something was unfolding beyond this suite. Something timed. Evelyn had come not only to negotiate, but to witness. If anything happens tonight, Evelyn continued, your former wife becomes part of the narrative, whether you want her to or not. There it was again. Pressure. Clean. Controlled. Strategic. I stepped closer to Olivia, not touching her, but making my position unmistakable. She will not be part of any narrative, I said quietly. Evelyn met my gaze without blinking. Then you should choose your next move carefully. The elevator chime echoed faintly from the hallway once more. Too many unscheduled movements for one night. Olivia exhaled slowly, and I felt it in my chest like a shared memory. 3 years ago, I chose to let her hate me to keep her safe. Tonight, the choice felt different. Tonight, safety might require something far more dangerous than distance. The elevator chime echoed again, closer this time, and I felt the shift before anyone spoke. My phone vibrated once more in my palm, a sharp pulse that meant my team had identified the unauthorized access point. Someone had bypassed the main lobby and entered through a private bank reserved for executive transport. That was not curiosity. That was coordination. Evelyn did not look surprised. She stood near the window now, hands loosely clasped, watching the city like she was observing weather patterns instead of a crisis unfolding 70 floors above ground. You have 5 minutes, she said quietly, not to me, but to the air itself. Olivia's eyes flicked toward her. 5 minutes until what? She asked. Evelyn did not answer directly. Until the narrative writes itself, she replied. I stepped forward, placing myself slightly between Olivia and the room, not blocking her, but aligning with her. Protection without possession. I was learning the difference in real time. Who else is involved? I asked evenly. Evelyn met my gaze. You know better than I do that power rarely operates alone. That was true. And tonight, Someone wanted to expose movement inside my network before sunrise. Not to destroy it, to destabilize it. Destabilization forces negotiation. Negotiation creates opportunity. I tapped a silent code into my phone, instructing Marcus to seal the floor discreetly. No alarms. No visible disruption. If panic entered the hallway, it would confirm weakness. Olivia stepped closer to me, her voice low. "Is this because of what you are moving tonight?" she asked. I held her eyes. There was no fear there now. Only clarity. "It is because someone wants to interrupt it," I said. "And they believe you are the interruption." The truth settled over her slowly. She had not walked into an investigation. She had walked into leverage. Evelyn watched the realization cross Olivia's face, and for the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not satisfaction. Not cruelty. Calculation. "You still have a choice," Evelyn said softly. "Cooperate, and the situation downstairs resolves quietly. Refuse, and events escalate beyond your control." Control. The word echoed in my mind. I had built my life around that principle. Control outcomes. Control risks. Control perception. But control fails when the equation includes emotion. Olivia turned to me fully now. "What are you not telling me?" she asked. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. In my world, hesitation can cost millions. But in hers, honesty costs pride. "Tonight," I said carefully, "I am finalizing an agreement that consolidates influence across 3 states. It reduces conflict. It prevents instability. But it shifts the balance of power." Her brow furrowed. "And someone does not want that." "Exactly." A soft buzz sounded from the hallway outside. Not loud. Not violent. Just a signal that something had triggered the outer perimeter protocols. Evelyn checked her watch calmly. "For minutes," she murmured. Olivia looked at me then, not as my former wife, not as a hotel employee, but as the only person in this room who had ever seen me before the Empire. "If I walk out with her," she said slowly, "does this stop?" Evelyn did not answer. I did. "No," I said quietly. "It only confirms that you are my weakness." The room went silent again. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. And for the first time tonight, I understood that the choice in front of me was no longer about business or reputation. It was about whether I would finally fight for her in the open, instead of sacrificing her in the dark. The silence after my confession felt heavier than any threat Evelyn could make. Weakness. I had just named it out loud. In my world, you do not admit that something can break you. You lock it away. You pretend it does not exist. But Olivia had never been something I could pretend about. She held my gaze without flinching. "Then stop treating me like one," she said quietly. The words landed with more force than anything else tonight. Evelyn watched the exchange with careful interest, like she was studying a fault line in concrete. 3 minutes, she reminded us softly. My phone buzzed again. Marcus sent a short update. 2 unidentified individuals attempting to access the restricted floor under the cover of a maintenance request. Fake credentials. Coordinated timing. Not law enforcement. Not media. Someone trying to force visibility at the exact moment negotiations were closing downstairs. I turned slightly, lowering my voice so only Olivia could hear. "This is not about you anymore," I said. "It is about destabilizing my position before sunrise." She stepped closer, lowering her voice too. "And if they succeed, then alliances fracture," I replied calmly. "And fractures invite opportunists." She searched my face, as if trying to decide whether I was exaggerating. I was not. Evelyn moved away from the window and walked slowly around the suite, heels soft against the carpet. "You see the problem," she said evenly. "Your consolidation creates fear. Fear creates reaction. Reaction creates risk." I faced her fully. "You orchestrated this," I said. Not an accusation. A deduction. She did not deny it. "I accelerated it," she corrected. "To give you an opportunity." Opportunity. The word tasted almost ironic. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "An opportunity for what?" she asked. Evelyn stopped a few feet from us. "For transparency," she said. "For cooperation. For an arrangement that protects civilians and stabilizes influence." She always framed it in moral language. Stabilizes influence. Protects civilians. It sounded noble. It sounded necessary. But what she wanted was leverage formalized. A quiet partnership that allowed oversight without public scandal. I felt the pieces aligning in my mind. If I refused, the disruption downstairs would escalate. If I agreed, I would invite scrutiny into operations I had spent years insulating. And in both scenarios, Olivia stood at the center of the equation. My phone buzzed once more. Marcus, perimeter holding but pressure increasing. 2 minutes. I exhaled slowly. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, traffic moving along the river like veins of light. Life continued. It always does. If I cooperate, I said carefully, looking at Evelyn. The unauthorized access stops. She inclined her head slightly. It becomes unnecessary. And she is removed from this conversation permanently. I added, nodding toward Olivia. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward her again. That depends, she said softly, on whether she chooses to remain adjacent to your world. Olivia straightened at that. Do not talk about me like I am an object on a contract, she said, her voice steady. I felt something shift inside me then. 3 years ago, I had chosen for her. I had decided what she could handle. Tonight, the choice was standing in front of me again, but this time it was not about distance. It was about respect. I turned to her fully. If I accept, I said quietly, it limits my freedom. It limits expansion. It changes how I operate. She held my gaze. And if you refuse? Then tonight becomes louder than I intended. Silence wrapped around us once more. 1 minute left. The negotiation was no longer about power or reputation. It was about whether I would finally build something that included her, instead of sacrificing her to protect it. And for the first time in years, I was not sure control was the most important thing in the room. Control has always been my religion, but love has always been my weakness. The second the thought formed, I knew the decision had already been made. The clock on the wall read 2:21 a.m., 59 minutes, until the transfer downstairs finalized. Less than 60 seconds before whatever pressure Evelyn had engineered either dissolved or detonated into something louder. I looked at Olivia, really looked at her, not as leverage, not as liability, but as the woman who once believed in me before the suits, before the security codes, before 70 floors of distance separated us from the street. If I accept your terms, I said evenly, my eyes never leaving hers. You walk away from her permanently. No more recruitment attempts. No more proximity. Evelyn studied me carefully. You are negotiating emotionally, she observed. I am negotiating clearly, I replied. She is not a bargaining chip. Olivia inhaled softly at that, and I felt the shift between us. Not dramatic, not loud, just something steady clicking back into place. My phone vibrated again. Marcus, perimeter breach attempt withdrawn. Awaiting instruction. The pressure downstairs was testing my response. I met Evelyn's gaze. Call them off, I said quietly. She did not move for 3 full seconds. Then she reached into her coat pocket, tapped a message into her phone, and slipped it away. You will receive a formal framework within 48 hours, she said. Oversight. Parameters. Reporting boundaries. Containment agreements. Containment. The irony almost made me smile. For years I contained threats. Tonight I was agreeing to contain myself. And she? I asked again. Evelyn looked at Olivia, her expression unreadable. She becomes irrelevant, she said. Unless she chooses otherwise. That was as close to assurance as I would get. My phone buzzed once more. Marcus, situation stabilized. No further escalation. The floor returned to silence. The city lights outside continued their indifferent shimmer. 1 hour ago this suite felt like a fortress. Now it felt like a crossroads. Evelyn gathered her gloves from the table. You built an empire by anticipating risk, she said softly. Do not forget that visibility is sometimes protection. Then she walked toward the door without another word. Marcus stepped aside to let her pass. The door closed gently behind her. The quiet that followed was different. Not tense. Not charged. Just real. Olivia remained standing a few feet away from me, her hands still at her sides. You just limited your own expansion, she said quietly. I nodded once. I just limited the way someone could use you, I corrected. She searched my face for a long moment, as if trying to find the ambition she used to resent. It was still there. It always would be. But it had shifted. You could have let it escalate, she said. You would have protected your position. I protected my position 3 years ago, I replied softly. It cost me my marriage. The words hung between us, fragile and honest. The empire still stood. The agreements would still finalize before sunrise. My influence would remain intact, only now under a different structure. For the first time in years, I had chosen something over growth. I stepped closer to her, not touching, just closing the distance we had both been pretending did not matter. You asked if the man you married still exists, I said quietly. He does. He just had to learn that power without you is not worth holding. The city kept glowing beneath us. The night kept moving forward. But something inside this room had finally shifted from sacrifice to choice. The door had barely clicked shut behind Evelyn when the weight of the night finally settled into something quieter, something more human. It was 2:28 a.m. The city outside still shimmered like nothing had changed, but everything inside. This room had. Olivia stood in the soft lamplight. The black maid uniform no longer a disguise, but a reminder of how far she had been willing to go to reach me. You gave up leverage, she said gently, almost in disbelief. You never do that. I let out a slow breath and loosened the tension in my shoulders. I used to believe expansion was the only way to survive, I answered. Tonight, I realize survival without you is just maintenance. The words felt unfamiliar, but not weak. Honest. She searched my face the way she used to when she suspected I was hiding something behind calm. For 3 years I had mastered that calm. Boardrooms, negotiations, threat assessments. But she had always seen past it. You should have trusted me, she said quietly. Not accusing, just stating a truth we both carried. I nodded. I thought loving you meant shielding you from every shadow, I admitted. I did not realize that shutting you out was its own kind of damage. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint line between her brows that appeared when she was thinking too hard. When you stood in that courtroom and told me I was holding you back, she said, her voice steady but low, I believed you. I rebuilt my life around that belief. The memory hit harder than any external threat tonight. I remembered the sterile light, the wooden bench, the echo of the judge's gavel. I had rehearsed those words in the mirror so they would not crack when I said them. I had watched her shoulders stiffen as if I had erased something sacred. I hated you, she continued softly. But I never stopped loving the man you were before all of this. I felt something shift again, deeper this time. Not strategy, not control. Vulnerability. He never left, I said. He just buried himself under responsibility. The transfer downstairs would finalize in less than 40 minutes. My phone remained silent now. The perimeter was stable. The agreement with Evelyn would restructure certain operations, reduce expansion speed, increase oversight. It would cost me influence in some circles. It would gain me stability in others. But for the first time in years, the cost did not feel like loss. Olivia glanced toward the window, the skyline reflecting in her eyes. If I stay, she said slowly, I stay because I choose you. Not because you are protecting me. Not because someone is threatening you. Because I believe you are building something better than what you walked away from. I stepped closer, closing the final inches between us. I did not reach for her. I did not claim her. I simply stood there, present. I am not asking you to stay in my shadow, I said quietly. I am asking if you are willing to stand beside me, knowing the world I operate in is not simple. She studied me for a long moment, measuring sincerity the way she always had. Then she nodded once. Small. Certain. The empire still stood. The night still moved forward. But for the first time since that courthouse morning 3 years ago, I was not choosing power over partnership. I was choosing both. And this time, I was not sacrificing her in the dark to keep my world intact. I was inviting her into the light of it, without disguise, without lies, without distance. The clock on the wall turned to 2:37 a.m., and for the first time all night, the suite felt steady. Not because the threats had disappeared, but because the uncertainty between us had. Olivia stepped closer to the window, the city reflecting across the glass like a second world layered over our own. If I stand beside you, she said softly, then I stand beside all of it. The scrutiny, the negotiations, the consequences. Her voice did not shake. She was not naive. She understood that partnership in my world required strength. I moved to her side, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence without crowding it. I am not asking you to carry my burdens, I said quietly. I am asking you to challenge me when I build something that loses its soul. She turned toward me fully then, and I saw it in her eyes. Not hesitation, not fear, resolve. 3 years ago, I thought love meant protection through distance. Tonight, I understood it meant transparency through risk. My phone buzzed again, but this time the message was simple. Transfer confirmed. Agreement executed. The consolidation downstairs had finalized under the new oversight terms. Slower growth, higher accountability, cleaner structure. The empire did not collapse. It adjusted. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. It is done, I said. Olivia studied my face, searching for regret. There was none. Only clarity. Does it cost you? She asked gently. I nodded once. It costs speed. It costs unchecked expansion. It costs the illusion that I can operate without boundaries. She held my gaze. And what does it give you? I looked at her without hesitation. Stability. And the chance to build something you do not have to investigate from the outside. Silence settled around us again, but this time it felt warm instead of sharp. The Maid uniform suddenly seemed out of place in a room that no longer felt like a battlefield. She glanced down at it with a faint, almost embarrassed smile. I cannot exactly return to work like this after tonight, she said softly. I allowed myself the smallest smile in response. You were never meant to be invisible, I said. She stepped closer, the distance between us finally closing without strategy or negotiation. If I stay, she said again, as if confirming it to herself, it is not because you saved me. It is because you chose me. I reached for her hand then, not possessive, not claiming, simply connecting. I should have chosen you openly 3 years ago, I admitted. I will not repeat that mistake. Outside, the river lights continued their quiet rhythm. The night did not announce our decision. There were no witnesses, no headlines, just two people who had finally stopped pretending that sacrifice was the only form of love. The empire would evolve. The agreements would arrive within 48 hours. There would be meetings, adjustments, new expectations. But for the first time since that courtroom morning, I was not building around a hidden absence. I was building with her present. And in a world that measures power by what a man controls, I had finally learned that the strongest position is the one where you no longer have to choose between ambition and the person who sees you clearly. By the time the clock reached 3:02 a.m., the city had begun its slow shift toward morning. The skyline outside the glass no longer felt distant. It felt possible. Olivia stood beside me without disguise, without hesitation, the black uniform now just fabric instead of armor. 3 years ago, I believed love required sacrifice. Tonight, I understood it required courage. Not the kind measured in territory or influence, but the kind measured in honesty. What happens tomorrow? She asked softly. Not anxious, just practical. I had always admired that about her. She did not romanticize outcomes. She prepared for them. I looked at the city 12 miles wide beneath us, at the bridges glowing faint gold across the river, at the quiet strength of a place that never stops moving. Tomorrow, I said slowly, I begin restructuring under the new framework. Slower expansion, clearer lines. No more decisions made in isolation. She studied me carefully. And me? The question was simple, but it carried weight. I turned fully toward her. You decide, I said. Not because I am protecting you. Not because someone is pressuring you. Because you choose where you belong. She searched my face for doubt and found none. That was the difference now. No rehearsed cruelty. No calculated distance. Just clarity. I do not want to disappear again, she said quietly. Then do not, I replied. Stand beside me in daylight. The words felt final. Not dramatic. Just certain. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out something I had not intended to reveal tonight. A small velvet box, worn at the edges. I had carried it for months without knowing why. I opened it slowly. Inside was the ring I had taken off 3 years ago in that silent courtroom. Not as a claim. As a reminder. Olivia's breath caught, but she did not step back. This is not about erasing the past, I said gently. It is about acknowledging that I made a decision for you once. I will not do that again. I held the ring in my palm, not forcing it forward. If you choose to walk beside me, it is because you want to build something stronger than what we lost. The city lights flickered as the first faint hint of dawn began to soften the horizon. Olivia stepped closer, her eyes steady. She did not look at the ring first. She looked at me. I am not here because I need protection, she said quietly. I am here because I believe you can lead without losing yourself. Those words meant more than any agreement signed downstairs tonight. I placed the ring gently into her hand, not on her finger. Choice. Always choice. She closed her fingers around it and gave a small, certain nod. No applause. No witnesses. Just a decision made in honesty instead of fear. Outside, the sky shifted from black to deep blue. The night that began with leverage and pressure ended with something simpler. I once ruled this city by controlling every variable. Tonight, I learned that the only power worth keeping is the one you do not have to guard alone. And as the first light touched the glass, I realized she did not return to expose me. She returned to remind me who I was before the Empire decided who I should be.